Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown! INDY!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up, got it! And Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn Emmy winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hey, everybody, welcome aboard. How are you? It is Wednesday, November 8th. Thanks a lot for joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Of course, coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway of the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios on what is going to be another spectacular November day. Oh, my gosh. Temperatures expected to be up in the mid to upper 70s. Enjoy it. Today's the last day. Can't complain no matter what. This is bonus weather. So can't complain when it starts to get cold. Appreciate it, but can't complain. Appreciate you being here with us on this Wednesday. Dylan Sinn will be joining us, Kyle Neddenriep, and Rick Bozich. Plenty to get to, of course. Night after Indiana opens up their 124th college basketball season with a hard-fought win over Florida Gulf Coast, who hit more three-pointers than I wish I could have thought of a good joke there. Man, they were raining them down at one point. They were shooting 50% from three, but of course they had to. They could not do anything inside. Indiana showing some early signs on still learning defense on this. When they switched to close out, they weren't closing their guys out. We'll get into all that stuff technically. I'm not the best person to do that, of course. I'm not pretending to be that, but fortunately last night on the post-game show with Todd Leary, hope if you were able to tune into that. If not, have a listen. It's up on the Indiana Sports Beat YouTube site, which you can find, of course, at Indiana Sports Beat Radio. And as a matter of fact, just so you do not miss any of that, make sure you sign up for Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Just hit that notifications toggle. You'll know when things are coming up because there's always something special. But Todd does, of course, a great job on breaking down exactly what you see on the court and why. And fans, their ups and downs, their highs and lows, the positives to talk about. Of course, everyone wants to talk about Mackenzie Mbako. Hey, you've just got to chill. Let things play out. It was a learning experience for the Hoosiers last night. They had to, they were having to work on trying to get back on the three-point shooters as Florida Gulf Coast did a good job on, I don't want to say exposing, but dealing with Indiana's learning in that category there. I'll have to pull the stats back up to see what the final stats were on what they hit as far as threes, but they were a lot. But I have to tell you, boy, for a minute, they just couldn't miss until they started missing some wide open threes, which they missed 4 or 5 in a row, and at least 4 of them were just wide open looks. And I'm talking about Florida Gulf Coast, so it was surprised me that they missed those. Plenty to get to in addition to Indiana basketball last night. Jim Harbaugh continues to be in the news, as he should be, as this story continues to move forward. Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti, he's going to be forced to step forward and do something, I believe. What will he do? I think the worst that's going to happen is a suspension, although that is something that Michigan would consider very, very serious. Out of their 3 last remaining games, they played no one yet. But Penn State and Ohio State are the remaining games. So I would love to see him suspended for that. But on one hand, on the other hand, I'm like, I'd rather see Michigan get beat with him. I generally don't take sides in games and whatnot, but I do in situations like this. I also saw something that Michigan is now trying to come up with, something that said, hey, they've got proof. We've got proof that in 2022, Purdue and it may have been Michigan State and somebody, I forget who else it was, had communications about signals. It's like Michigan is just grasping for straws. Who cares if they talked about it? They didn't send somebody to do espionage, in essence. Michigan is something. I still laugh at the president's letter to the Big Ten imploring, I implore you, sir, wait until the NCAA comes out with their findings, because we all know the NCAA does things swiftly and justly. Boy, that's a bunch of crap, isn't it? How's everybody doing today? Appreciate you for jumping on board already. Lots of folks. Appreciate Fred on. David, how about you? Gabe Cups. Yep, we'll talk about Gabe. Doug, Dwayne, John Dwayne says it was nice to have the Todd father back. He loves his views on the game coming from the perspective of a former player. Nice to have Todd back. Absolutely. Not only that, but a former Bob Knight player. And I mentioned that because Bob Knight players are just smarter about the game. And I mean that genuinely, because they took they got a master's degree in basketball, or they have a master's degree in basketball. And I mean that. Bob Knight, under Bob Knight, and I'm not acting like he was didn't have the demons he did. Of course he did. I compartmentalize that. I'm not saying that those are overlooked. Well, I don't overlook them. I've talked about them plenty. I'm just not talking about that at the moment. I'm talking about the reason people like Todd Leary, who played for him, are so good at dissecting games, because they see on the court things that are going on, and it was a class for them. They had to take notes. I've said this 1,000 times. I asked Calbert Cheney in Calbert's presser when his thoughts on Knight, and his response was, "Hey, I got my notebook upstairs. It's on my shelf." 30 years later, 30 years, these guys still have this. Todd says he still has his. And one time I'm going to have Todd bring in one of those notebooks to the show. But thanks for everybody did tune in to Indiana basketball postgame show with Todd Leary last night. Came to you from Hanks, Hoosier Hanks East, over on South College Mall Road. Great time. And that's just going to be fun. That's a great environment, a great place. It's a perfect place to sit there and eat, watch the game. On away games, we'll probably just be there the whole time watching the game. So come out and join us, and then be a part of the post-game show. You can ask questions from the audience, in addition to us taking those from those of you that cannot be there in Bloomington. But Indiana, again, getting their first win. It could have been worse. other teams didn't get that done. Good learning experience for the Hoosiers last night. As you could tell, they needed that, as always. That's what these games are for. You've got to be stressed. Mackenzie Mbako, a little bit of the freshman blues last night. Shots didn't fall right off the bat. Not only that, he had some shots defensively hit on him, but it's great how he bounces back. That is what you want to see. And Todd continues to talk about, that corner three. If you would go back to 1989, I can pretty well guarantee you that Calbert Chaney or Todd or Pat Graham or Greg Graham or Chris Reynolds, Chris Lawson, any of those guys, I'm pretty sure they probably had some games as a freshman that was like, oops. I guarantee you, I don't even have to guess without asking Todd, hey, your freshman year, how many times did you get put in and jerked out of a game? And he said it. He goes, hey, if I was 2 for 2, I'm probably not coming out. He goes, I go for 0 for 2. He goes, bam, I'm on the bench. So nothing to get distraught about. That's for dang sure. But we appreciate everybody joining us last night. It was a blast. Thanks to Benny, the GM over there at Hoosier Hanks East in the former Avers Public House. Man, that was actually one of the most fun that we've had doing a post-game show, and part of that was the environment. Great environment. Las Vegas Larry's on board. Philip says maybe overreaction. Start Cups, move Renew, and nah, you don't move anybody right now. Not to disagree with you, Philip, but you cannot make judgments off of one game. You just Mackenzie Mbako is probably the most talented player on the floor. He is not a sixth man. Bringing Gabe Cupps off the bench is the smartest thing you can do, in my opinion, because you're basically bringing in a second starter. So now you've got starters on top of starters. But yeah, not to say Gabe Cupps will never. Who's he going to start over? I don't see that happening this year. I could be wrong, but hey, we've got lots more to get to. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette is going to join us. Kyle Neddenriep later on will get you caught up and set up for Indiana high school football playoffs as that continues to roll on. And the Hall of Famer, Rick Bozich, joins us in the second hour here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Hello to everybody listening down on the Ref, ESPN 97.7 in Evansville, of course, up in the region on WJOB 1230 AM, 104.7, the voice of the region, over in Fort Wayne on 1380 The Fan. We appreciate you guys. Back with Dylan Sinn right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
John Boy, I've got to get that. We really need that Eagle Point commercial change that I sent to you.
Oh, you sent me. That's right. You did send me a new one. I'll update that for us. That's my bad.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Dylan Sinn. How are you, sir?
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I am great. I'm looking at TJ. I like that. I like that.
Nice.
Yeah, everybody seemed to enjoy that last night. Gritty said, "Oh, it's so nice to see you two back together." Like it was she had two hearts there, and I forgot to mention. I'm like, no, wait a minute. I said, easy there. And
it's Indiana basketball's favorite bromance.
I was gonna scoot away a little bit, easy there,
People thought you guys broke up like the Beatles, and are very excited to see a reunion.
The Beatles do have a new song out.
By the way, a lot of people, I listened to it. I don't really know what to judge it off of. I'm not really a Beatles fan, but like a lot of people were bitching about it from what I saw.
People
the
think
song?
People think it's a betrayal of their legacy. They didn't want it. The idea seems to be, well, they didn't release it themselves, therefore they didn't want it out there, so it shouldn't be out there.
But there's still 2 living members of the Beatles who probably had to approve it to be released. So
that is true. I wonder what Paul and Ringo think.
Not only that, what the hell else are you going to do with it? I mean,
that's true. Like, why keep it to yourself if it was meant to initially be put into the public?
Okay, are you telling me if someone found a Picasso that, oh, this was a first rendering, he didn't really like it, he didn't want it displayed, let's throw this in the trash? That ain't happening. I don't care, not to be gross, but I don't care if he took a crap on a piece of canvas. If it was a Picasso, you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. How's Dylan doing?
I'm doing well. Good. Glad to be on it.
Glad to have you back. I can never get centered. Right. I feel like I'm centered.
You're further away from the camera than you usually are.
Well,
is Indiana going to be bowl eligible, Dylan? You have 3 seconds to answer.
Oh my God.
No,
he doesn't. We're going to talk about that. Hold on.
All right, here we go, guys.
That's better than a birdie. But you don't have to be a student to play at Eagle Point. Go online to set your tee time or call 812-824-4040. The golf club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by the Chop Shop, home of the Indiana football and men's basketball coaches shows. Now back to the golf club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday, November 8th. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate you. Coming to you from high atop the 18th fairway here at the golf club at Eagle Point Studios, brought to you by Chop Shop, where tonight, man, it's just nonstop. Gee whiz. Monday night was the coaches show there with Don Fisher. Last night was the basketball game at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. Tonight is the coaches show with Tom Allen inside Indiana football and Don Fisher. Dude, I need a break. I'm telling you. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette with us now. How's it going, brother?
I'm good. Always glad to be on, Jim.
Grateful as always to have you. So, were you in Bloomington last night? Where was Dylan? You know, but that's a great segment we should start having. Where's Dylan? Because Dylan is covering multiple programs. He covers Indiana, covers Purdue, covers Notre Dame. And it's the proper pronunciation in America. Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame.
My fiance is a Notre Dame grad. She pronounces it Notre Dame. So that's see, how
to me, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, especially coming from a graduate, but to me, that's the bastardization of American the language.
Yeah,
because we say so many words that are not said as they were originally said, especially coming from England, where the syllable, the emphasis on the syllable has been just simply changed, or like frustrated is my favorite in England. I'm sorry, are you frustrated? Yeah, it's hard for me not. I say at Notre Dame, I think, but I guess it depends at the time. If I'm in a hurry, I'll probably say Notre Dame, but who knows? Who cares, really? Jim Harbaugh, baby. Jim Harbaugh. He's been able to kind of ignore most things. This is not one that he's going to be able to ignore. A. B. the Big Ten coaches are just simply pissed off. And I've never seen that ever, in where an entire conference of coaches were pissed at another coach to the point to where you have a meeting with a conference commissioner and tell them that very thing. And that has obviously weighed heavily. And the fact that everybody knows that the NCAA will do jack squat. They will 3 years from now announce sanctions against Michigan from the recruiting scandal from 2023. And this, of course, be in the year 2028 when this gets done by the NCAA. Jim Harbaugh has been sanctioned for 3 games. Of course, he's been out of college football for 5 years, so it doesn't matter. That's the NCAA. The Big Ten is going to have to step up first. That is also something that normally does not happen, out of respect of a hierarchy kind of a thing. But I think there's no doubt that Tony Petitti is feeling the pressure, because the NCAA doesn't mean jack squat when it comes to the Big Ten at the end of the day. And boy, but that means suspension. And 2 out of their last 3 games are against Penn State and Ohio State, which I'm still wondering how good Penn State really is. That leaves Ohio State as, sadly, the only 2 teams, along with Michigan, that are what you would call good in the Big Ten. I can't understand that. But anyway, and Tony Petitti is playing this balancing act, Dylan, of trying to ensure the Big Ten has the best chance of having a player in the college football playoffs. And if Michigan were to beat Ohio State, they want to make sure that happens okay. But the rest of the football world is not going to enjoy that. Georgia, let's say it's Georgia. They've already got proof that they spied on their games previously. So it goes so deep, and I'm sick of, I'll be honest with you. On one hand, I say, hey man, he's pushing the limits, but there are lines. And when you go way over the line, this is way over the line. This is espionage at its best.
And sure, and I guess we should be clear that there still is no evidence yet. And I'm not saying.
Wait a minute.
I'm not saying
no evidence revealed.
I'm not saying there won't be any. I'm saying that we should point out there's no evidence yet that Jim Harbaugh knew about this. My guess has been that there's probably not going to be any, just because it was probably one of those need to know basis things, like Harbaugh. Yeah, right. Speculation on that, whether he knew about it or not, it doesn't matter. He's still going to be punished.
It's no different than La Cosa Nostra. They know, but they're shielded. They're kept shielded.
Sure, that would be my guess as well. In some form, I do think that, and the way the NCAA works, and the way the Big Ten will probably operate is that it's one of those things where if Jim Harbaugh didn't know, he should have known. One of those things. And so he will be punished. There's no doubt about that. The question then going forward is what that punishment is when it comes down, and when it actually, there's a difference between when it comes down, when it's announced, and when it's actually enforced, because I think there have been some experts that have suggested basically the Big Ten suspends Jim Harbaugh for the next 3 games. The Michigan sues basically, and the court that they sue in, puts an injunction on enforcing the penalty, and so basically the Big Ten can say, well, can tell those angry coaches, well, we tried, and Michigan can say, well, we have our coach for the last 3 games, and then it's dealt with in the offseason anyway. And so I think that might be where we're headed here, where it's no one's really happy, but everyone at least feels like someone tried to do something on their behalf.
Which still doesn't do jack, because
it's because Michigan seems like they're prepared to go to the mat about this.
Well,
right?
Of course they are.
Well,
they
right,
have to.
they are not going to just say, well, Jim messed up. We agree with any punishment that he's landed. No. That is not going to happen. And so there is going to be court battles over this, basically. And so basically any court is probably going to say, well, until this plays out, we can't let them enforce the penalty because then there's no point in having the court. So I do think that Michigan's president came out with a letter last year, basically last week, basically saying, hey, we need to let due process play out here. Not what you believe.
No. He begged. He was basically begging the Big Ten to allow the NCAA to play out. Of course. Because as I said, he knows good and damn well that's going to take 3 years for that to play out.
And I think that's indicative of the way Michigan is going to play this, which is that, like, again, they are not going to take this and just say, oh, well, whatever you guys say, we're behind the Big Ten. No, it seems like they're prepared to, for lack of a better term, go to war with the Big Ten. This is going to end up in court. My guess is that Harbaugh is on the sidelines the rest of the regular season. Beyond that, I'm not sure.
Yeah. And my favorite statement is come from Connor Stallions, who I am sure has received a nice little parting package from a Michigan booster that simply says, shh. I'm making the shush sound for those of you who can't see. Hush money, baby. Just hush and go away. Hush, puppy. Hush, puppy. Just hush and go away. Here's a nice chunk of change, because when he says that in no way that any coaches know, oh, that's the biggest bunch of bull creep that I've ever heard in my life. Why would he be going on all of these trips, all these tickets, doing all of that? Is he doing it for fun?
No.
Is he doing it to stockpile stuff in his mom and dad's basement? No. And to say that no other coach knew, that's horse crap. He's not paying for this stuff out of his pocket, A. B, why is he doing it? So to say that no other coaches knew, I know they're trying to minimize and trying to scapegoat him, of course, but there's just no way. I guess the next question was, he probably wasn't on Michigan's sidelines during a lot of the games, or was he?
He was. There have been photos of him, I believe, on the sidelines for some of their games. I think that's where some teams have.
I say that, Dylan, because I assumed he was off someplace else spying.
Well, that's the thing, is that it seems like he basically was hiring people to go spy for him. He would buy the tickets and then he would send other people to the games, because that's what Purdue said was
except
that
for Central Michigan.
Right. Well, that's because he wasn't right, because that was a weekday. That was a weeknight game, right? That was a weeknight game, right? So that's what Purdue said last week, was that they have evidence of Stallions buying the tickets, and then they had evidence of other people, not Stallions, sitting in those seats and filming. And so it's basically he would send other people to these games. I'm not sure if he would go to how many of them he would go to himself. If Michigan had a bye week, or maybe he was at some of them and not others. I'm not sure. I don't think that's become clear yet, but it's pretty clear that he would send other people. It seems like the evidence suggests he would send other people to these games. But that goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is, so you're saying, yeah, other assistant coaches or other coaches had to have known. And I agree with you. I think it's very likely they did, but there's no evidence as of yet that they did. And so I think that's going to be where the rubber meets the road is, does the NCAA or the Big Ten need Stallions' cooperation to find out that they knew, or can they find it some other way? And so I think that's going to be a significant portion. And again, it's going to take time. Like people talk about the NCAA dragging its feet. And yes, the NCAA is going to drag its feet because it doesn't have the capacity to investigate something like this generally. We just saw Bill Self get paid the highest paid contract in college basketball, and we saw what the NCAA did with that. But it will take time for the NCAA. Even a well-run operation would take time to kind of parse what happened here. And so it's going to take a little bit. it seems to me like this is not going to be adjudicated until the offseason would be my guess. I don't know. Apparently the Big Ten is going to make some kind of going to make some kind of announcement today, it seems like, and then Michigan's going to make a counter announcement. I don't know. We'll see. But my guess is this takes until at least the offseason to get settled.
Here's what's funny. Michigan, after getting their hand caught in the jar, believes that 3 other schools shared intelligence about their signals during the 2022 season. Yeah. Michigan has sent documents to the Big Ten supposedly proving this claim that Ohio State had given Michigan's offensive signals and that Rutgers had gave Michigan's defensive signals to Purdue prior to last year's Big Ten championship game. Okay, great. What the hell does that have to do with this? Nothing. This is a total different thing. Do you have any reference of them stealing signals? Is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about espionage. We're talking about breaking the rules. Stealing signals is not against the rules.
Sure.
If you are able to just do it, if you're able to figure it out, but that's figuring it out on, just by happenstance or being smart, not by sending people to advanced games, not by filming sidelines. Those are strictly prohibited, and damn sure not by having a coach on the sidelines of another team. That's that one I can't wait to find out, because that could be, if that was true, either he is really good at what he does or somebody at Central Michigan had a hand in that, because he was wearing the full uniform, the whole deal.
Yeah. I do think that what Michigan is trying to do there with the basically telling the Big Ten, hey, Purdue had our signals heading into the Big Ten championship game. What they're trying to do is first of all distract. That's kind of what's happening here. That's just the way this works. And second of all, to basically say, hey, basically teams are trading signs like candy here. It's like everyone knows everyone's signals at this point in the season. We didn't really gain that much of a competitive advantage from this, even though it was against the rules. Give us a little slap on the wrist and let's move on here. That's what Michigan is trying to do. Whether the Big Ten buys that, probably not. Right? I don't think the Big Ten is going to be convinced by that. But what they're trying to do is basically is make the point, hey, this is not some kind of crazy competitive advantage to have access to other teams' signals. Purdue had them, and look what we did to them. So I think that's the idea. I don't think the Big Ten's going to buy that, but that's the idea.
Exactly. Hey, we've got to take a break. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette's with us. We've got more to get to, including Indiana basketball opening the season and getting a win last night. A little nervy on some points. We'll talk about that. Indiana football with a continued opportunity to remain bowl eligible in week 10. The fact that I'm saying that is a bit of a surprise, but it's real. Dylan Sinn with us here. Back with more Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. All right. So are you covering all 3 teams right now, Dylan?
I don't really cover Notre Dame basketball that much. I am covering IU and Purdue, and then obviously the 3 football teams. So yeah, I'd say this is kind of the busy time of the year for me.
I feel like the crossover in November and December is pretty intense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's also fun. Like I love like going around everywhere and yeah.
Where will you be football wise this weekend?
This weekend, I'm actually not going to a football game because Notre Dame is off, and Purdue and Indiana are on the road. So I have this Saturday. I'm going to be working at the office basically, but I will be at IU Army on Sunday.
I'm curious what Indiana is going to do for Bob Knight for that game, because obviously with it being a to legacy and stuff, I'm sure they'll do something with Army being in town.
ain't doing much of anything.
You don't think so?
No, because the Knight family's already requested that.
Well, they don't have to do anything for the family itself, but I don't know. You just think they'd do something considering he coached it both.
Well, there's no way they don't mention it. I will be honest with you. I'm a little surprised that they did not have something at Simon Scott Assembly Hall, because it would have been standing room only, I think.
Yeah, but they want to respect his request is the thing, I guess.
Well, I understand that. I'm just saying I'm surprised that
the family didn't want to do that.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Package, you can trust that you're making the right choice with Garnish Catering. Visit garnishcatering.com. That's garnishcatering.com. Garnish Catering is a proud partner of Wow Food Group. This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday. It's Hump Day. Don't forget, if you're looking for a home in the Indianapolis area, you need Cheryl Sizemore, and her 2 decades of experience could be the difference between you getting the home you want or not. Reach out to her, Cheryl, at IndyHomePros.com. Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette still with us here. Last night, Indiana kicked off their 124th collegiate basketball season, Dylan, and a little shaky. The Eagles and from Florida Gulf Coast, which ironically I have to go to a wedding this weekend that is right next to Fort Myers, which is where they're from. So just ironic to me for no reason other than that. Man, were you at the game last night? I can't remember.
I was, yeah.
I thought you were.
To answer your question from earlier, I was at West Lafayette on Monday, and I was for the Purdue game, and I was in Bloomington last night.
Yeah, I didn't. I was setting up our first pregame show at Hoosier Hanks East, and so I was late getting to the game, and then had to jet out. I actually didn't stay for the postgame presser for this one, but so there was just jumping around too much. But man, I was a little surprised how they were not able to fix the closeouts in the second half on these 3-point shooters. They continued to get they weren't. The difference is, think back in Archie Miller and then IUPUI Fort Wayne and the Indiana State game. Those guys were just lost. I mean, they were literally lost 5, 6, 7 feet away from the guy. This was more about overhelping and not making the decision to get back out on the shooter quick enough. That is something that I think will be fixed by Mike Woodson. I think that's just an adjustment and understanding, but they've done an incredible job of defending the interior, and Kellel Ware is a presence. And I mean, that sounds like something stupid and obvious to say. Of course he is. He's 7'2" or whatever. But on the postgame show last night, I talked about how he's sneaky, because it's like he almost baits you, because if there's an offensive player coming in, but another defender has him, that player's mainly worried about this defender and getting by him and getting a shot up. And then you forget about this big old, it's like me having a broomstick in my hand, boom, afterwards. He kind of comes out of nowhere and just engulfs balls like the Cookie Monster, man.
Yeah, he was really, really good last night. There was some worries that Indiana's defense the last couple of years was so good in the interior, not because IU was so great as a team, but because Trace Jackson-Davis was able to erase so many mistakes. And I think that might have been true, but Kellel Ware can erase just as many mistakes and maybe more. He's just so long in the interior that it's just really, he affects a lot of shots. He's going to block a lot of shots. He has good timing. I think when it comes to the 3-pointers, I looked back at the tape. 7 of the 13 3-pointers were a result of either miscommunication or, as you said, overhelping. I do think the overhelping can be fixed pretty easily. Because Xavier Johnson overhelped and gave up a 3 last night. Like, it's not just the inexperienced players that were doing it. So that's something that needs to be fixed, and I think it will be. The bigger problem, and Mike Woodson talked about this after the game, was there are times where there's miscommunications on switches and guys don't know who they're supposed to be going to. And that led to at least 3 or 4 that I counted open threes. And some of them didn't go down, right? There were more that could have gone down that they had open shots.
Dude, they missed in the second half.
Yeah.
They missed like 5 in a row, and 4 of them were just wide open. And I'm like, oh my God, how they were
right. And so that's going to be an issue going forward. You have to be able to fix that. And Mike Woodson said it after the game. He basically said it was mostly the 3 young guys. It was Mackenzie Mbako, it was CJ Gunn, and it was Caleb Banks. And so that's why he didn't play Mackenzie Mbako for the last 15-34 of the game. He basically took him out and was like, we can't play you right now because you don't know exactly where you're supposed to be going on defense often enough to be on the floor. And so,
and it was probably better for him to be sitting on the sideline next to a coach with a coach pointing out, see that right there? Watch this. See this? You can get a lot more done like that.
Yeah, but Mackenzie Mbako is a starter. He is going to start. He is going to play big minutes. They need to get him up to speed as soon as they can here. Banks and Gunn, they're coming off the bench. They have a little more time to get up to speed. It's less worried about them, although it's a little bit concerning that they are sophomores and haven't gotten this yet. But I do think you need to get Mbako up to speed as soon as possible. Because we can see he has a gifted offensive game, right? He deserves to be out there. He needs to be out there. It's just a question of, can he play defense enough to make that palatable for IU? I don't think it was an example of him not trying. I think if you look at it wasn't an effort thing, right? It's kind of, he's a freshman. He's still trying to figure out where do I go in this situation? If they're switching, who do I follow? Right. I think there's still you can see as he's on the floor, like if you kind of slow it down a little bit, you can kind of see the gears in his brain working. And basically it's moving fast for him right now. And I know that happens to a lot of freshmen. Right. And so I think the question now is, how quickly can you get the game slowed down for him? And that's going to be the most important piece of Mike Woodson's coaching here over the next couple of weeks as Indiana gets deeper into the season, is helping him slow the game down.
Well, and he said last night, I've got some work to do.
Yep.
And like CJ Gunn is a great basketball player, a good shooter. His shooting has not shown itself yet. And I think partly because his defense is not where it needs to be, so that's creating a little havoc inside his mind, because when you get beat or you don't do something, that's something you're thinking about. Also, Todd made a great point last night that when you get into the game, you need to do some things. You need to show why you're supposed to be in the game, and that includes hitting some shots, which in turn will sometimes lead you to force things and force bad shots. Todd pointed out that 2 of CJ's shots were just bad shots. And I'm not getting on CJ. He's a great kid, a great athlete, a player, and I think that it'll come around. It just, the game is so fast, and it's not like, you're the guys you're bringing in are weak sisters, man. You're bringing in the elite talent, so it just always stays at a high level. Caleb Banks, little surprised on him defensively, because that seemed to be something that he brought to the table last year. But I'm thinking now maybe that's just more hustle and effort, which is great, but it also has to be geared in the right place. And I guess he's just not there either. And you have to play both ends of the floor, or your offense doesn't much matter unless you're just knocking the damn lights out.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think that CJ Gunn and Caleb Banks are going to have a role on this team, right? They are going to play minutes and they are going to contribute. And I think they both can contribute. I think they're both very good players. It is just a question of getting them up to speed on the defensive end. And that's what you need, what for guys like that who come off the bench, the best way that they can get themselves involved in the game is being active on the defensive end, and from there, your offense can flow, right? And I think you get a tip, get a nice defensive stop, get a good contest on a shot that misses, and then get up the floor and get out in transition, that kind of thing. And I think that once you start doing that, you just become so much more confident on the offensive end as well. To your point, Jim, about how things just slow down in your mind, and your mind isn't as cluttered, and you're not thinking about the other end of the floor, and you can just go shoot. Because I think CJ Gunn especially, you're right. He can shoot the lights out of the ball. There's no question about that. We see it in warm-ups. He's knocking down shot after shot after shot, and it looks pure. It looks natural. I do think he's a better shooter than he's shown at IU, and I do think he's thinking a little bit too much right now when he goes up for jumpers, and I think that is related to the defensive end.
No doubt about that. And once his shot starts falling, this is a dude that, I said, I go back to high school. I go back to his senior year. I remember his first game back off of an injury. He had 18 points in the fourth quarter. This is a guy that can hit the shots, especially once he gets comfortable. And there's just a lot going on in their minds right now, because it's not just, hey, let's come down and put up 85 points and win this game. No, you have to play defense or your ass is going to be on the pine, because it is so integral in what the team is trying to accomplish. Kel Ware is it's already proving to be I looked at him and I'm like, man, he's awfully thin, and I was really worried, and we haven't seen him play big guys yet, but he's not getting pushed around. He's able to play in there and use his length, which is athletic length, is different than, say, Zach Edey. Zach Edey is 7'4" and 1,000 pounds. You're not going to move him, right, but you can out-athlete him. And that's what I think that you have to do to a Zach Edey. You have to either front him and frustrate him, or you just simply have to out-athlete him. And I think that that's something that Kel Ware can do, especially if he's not guarding him from the backside or whatever. We'll see how that goes. But
and I will say one thing on Kel Ware. We heard all offseason about, there's questions about his motor. Mike Woodson said he got a reputation at Oregon for being lazy, and he needs to shed that and all this. I didn't see any issues with his motor last night. I thought he played really, really hard. I looked at it and I was like, he's chasing rebounds. He's doing what they need him to do on offense. I thought last year at Oregon, he fell in love with the three-pointer a little bit too much, trying to kind of be the perimeter guy, basically be Kevin Durant. And I think last night he did exactly what IU needed him to do on offense, which was plant yourself under the rim and clean up everything around it. And he did that. Like, Kel Ware last night, if he puts together 30 performances like that, he's going in the lottery. I don't really think there's any question about that, because he played hard and he played well.
Absolutely. And then, of course, Gabe Cupps. I have not even mentioned his name yet, hardly, for good reason, because I didn't want the quotes to go nuts here. There's already been a ton. He's the next Trey Galloway, but better. He's not only going to be a glue guy for Indiana, which that's kind of a goofy term, but he can handle the ball. He can shoot the ball. He can facilitate the ball. He does not get rattled. He looks comfortable now. And I'm not saying he's perfect, not going to make mistakes. He is. He will. But he looks comfortable. And that is so important, because if you're comfortable right now, you're less likely to make mistakes. You're more likely to do the things that you're supposed to do. You're more likely to learn. And he is in that position. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying that he's going to be into the starting lineup. I'm saying he's not going to be in the starting lineup. That's not going to happen. He's not going to replace someone like Trey Galloway. I don't care if he outscores him. It's not about that. I've already mentioned that having him come off the bench what a jewel. What a thing that is to have. How many teams have something like that? That's what you want. Trey Galloway did take a few more shots last night than I thought he would. As a matter of fact, he was the freaking leading scorer of the game.
7 of 9 shooting. Like he took more shots, and they were good shots. They were in the flow of the offense. I thought Trey Galloway played relatively well last night.
The only 2 shots he missed, one was a 3-pointer, which he would have never taken last year, which I'm like, even when he took the shot and missed, I'm like, who cares? He needs to take that. He has to take that shot. Yeah. It was not one that was just wide open. He got the ball, he was set, and he took it. He missed it. Big deal. But he hit a 3 as well early on. I thought that was going to light him up, get him going. But anyway, he does not look uncomfortable taking the shot.
No, and he seems like he knows that he is going to have to be a scorer for this team. And he was the one of all of IU's guards. He was the one that was able to get into the lane and create with the most regularity. Like he would get in the lane, he'd kick out. Like that's how Khalil Ware got his 3. His 3-pointer was Galloway drove into the lane, crossed over, and then kind of threw a pass behind his back to Ware for an open 3. Like that was one of the few shots IU had during the game that was really wide open because Galloway made a play, and he was able to get into the lane with regularity, and they need him to do that because that's what he was doing on a more minor basis at the end of the 2021-22 season. He didn't do it quite as much last year. He was more of a spot-up guy last year, and I think they need him to be more aggressive this season.
Absolutely. What's up next for you, brother?
I will be we have previews coming out for the IU women's team, which starts their season on Thursday, so I'll have a preview of that in Thursday's paper, and then I will be at IU Army on Sunday, so looking forward to that.
Absolutely. Well, brother, it's always we're glad to have you and look forward to it each and every Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week. Enjoy. What do you got in high school football this Friday? Something, I'm sure.
I will be at Leo, Mississinawa, regional championship up there in Mississinawa, so very excited about that.
All right. I've got to say hi to all of our folks listening on the Fan 1380, Fort Wayne's only sports station. And, of course, stick around. Brett Rump is coming up after Indiana Sports Beat Radio. We've got more coming up in our second hour, and we'll bring it to you right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
In the market. Thank you, my brother.
Sure, no problem. I will see you. Will I see you on Sunday, Jim?
No, that is a game I am not going to be able to make. I am flying out tomorrow to go to a wedding this weekend.
All right.
And I ended up making I come back on Tuesday.
Okay, so you'll be there for
maybe Monday. I don't know. I think it's Monday I come back. I forget.
Okay.
And then Saturday out to New York.
Okay.
That's here already. I'm like, holy crap.
So I will see you on Wednesday then, probably for the Wright State game before you fly out to New York.
You would be right.
All right.
You would be in the right state of mind.
That's right. All right. Okay, Jim. I'll talk to you later. John, always good to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you very much, Dylan.
All right. Bye, guys.
Man, these games come non-freaking stop. When's Wright State? Thursday, I think.
I
don't have this. Man, I got so many
big gap between games. If that's the case.
Well,
yeah, it's
Thursday.
It's Thursday. So you had yesterday. You have.
It's
Sunday,
this Thursday.
No, it's.
Oh no, it's this. Oh, so Sunday. All right, so this Sunday is Army. I wonder if they've ever played Army here. I've got to look that up.
And the following Sunday is the Empire Classic.
Right. That's when I go to
New York.
Yeah. We will be in New York, folks, by the way. That's why you need to subscribe. We've got stuff going on up there we'll talk about. There is the man, Kyle Neddenriep. I bet it's really fun having to cover Indiana high school football playoffs right now and the start of basketball season.
Yeah, it is. It's getting to be that time of year where the fuse is running short at times. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it, man. Holy cow. That is it. The other day it was just, what is today? Wednesday? I don't even know. I think maybe it was Monday. And I was yawning at like 5 and somebody's like, tired? I go, yeah. And I fell asleep today too. I go, man, I said, yeah. I said, I'm worn out. I said, it's been 7 days a week all of a sudden with football and then Indiana having basketball games on Sunday. And I'm like, shit.
All right, here we go, guys. 812-583-0919 or go to mystonecrestliving.com. That's mystonecrestliving.com for more details. This segment is brought to you by the Ugly Grouper. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hey, welcome back. Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday, November 8th, brought to you by the Ugly Grouper down on Anna Maria Island, Florida. All of our peeps that live down in Florida, make sure you head over there and have the catch of the day. And when you're traveling, stop in. As we've had several listeners do. As a matter of fact, if you are traveling and you do that, take a picture and send it to us. I'll make sure you get something cool from Indiana Sports Beat Radio merch-wise. We'll get that taken care of. Please welcome in Kyle Neddenriep, the hardest working man in sports journalism, covering Indiana high school sports. He covers it all right now. Then not the final stages, I guess, the mid stages of Indiana high school football playoff action, the start of high school basketball, and what else you got going?
Well, it's signing day today, so that's another thing on top of everything else. So
fax machines are busy everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, we just published a list, so people go online and look at who. We'll update that throughout the day. I know there's some that aren't on there yet that will be, but yeah, a lot of Central Indiana athletes, obviously, in a lot of sports. Other than football it's not a signing day for football today. But other than that, most sports are signing. This is the start of the early period. So, yeah, on top of everything else, it's that time of year for sure. And a lot of fun with football right now, being in the regional round and looking forward to that. But also, basketball practice started Monday. Basically, teams had tryouts the last 2 days. I mean, I think most teams knew who they were keeping at this point. But, all that stuff finalized by yesterday. And practice officially, I guess, kind of starts today with the teams you have and everything without the tryouts. So kind of a fun time of year for basketball and football.
Yeah, if you go to if you're a subscriber to the Indy Star, which you should be, keep local papers alive. I am. You'll see that the piece that Kyle's talking about, sitting at the top there, of course, from Kokomo, Flory Badunga, who ended up signing with Kansas. And maybe Bill Self can float him alone, as Bill Self just signed a 5-year, $53 million contract. I think that is a little bit more than Kyle's. We'll have to check the notes on that. But how about them? How about them apples, as I used to say to my daughter? And she'd say, "What apples, Daddy?" Buddy, that's a lot of apples.
Yeah, Flory's he's going to do a little thing after school tomorrow up at Kokomo, but yeah, I mean, that's obviously a done deal. I guess up until he signs, it's not, but it will be on tomorrow officially. So, but yeah, that's interesting. Bill Self has obviously proved himself over a long period of time, and
especially with the help of Adidas. Yeah,
exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, KU obviously one of the all-time programs, and I get why Flory's going there, but yeah, so that's one of them. KJ Wyndham will be added to that list going to Northwestern. I just need to confirm that some of those signings get confirmed and everything, but there'll be more coming.
How did Kansas get Flory away from Duke? It had to just come down to money, because he was talking all this Duke stuff leading up to it. And Kansas kind of came out of, I don't want to say left field, but they weren't there. And then boom, all of a sudden, I think they started making it rain. And that must have been a big change.
Well, and I will say too, in the week leading up to him making that decision in August, there was a lot of, I think, groupthink among, and I'm not like blaming anybody, but I think there was a lot of groupthink among reporters, and maybe some, you know how that works sometimes where, you know, one guy makes a crystal ball, and it's based on something, obviously. People were sort of speculating, and I remember in the week leading up, I had talked to someone who said, you know, kind of saying like not so fast on the Duke stuff. I mean, I think it could still be, and I was thinking Auburn. Auburn was kind of the one that, you know, people were sort of expecting, I think, and there was a lot of smoke that direction too. But, you know, as I talked to someone who kind of knew, I mean, they said, hey, Bill Self's been at everything. They, you know, their coaches have made him a priority. And I'm not saying, you know, there's other reasons too, or there certainly could be, but I kind of got the sense maybe all that people were expecting with Duke wasn't necessarily accurate. So, and as that turned out with Auburn, I mean, a lot of people were picking Auburn the day leading up to him, really the hours leading up to his decision. So, but yeah, I mean, talking to somebody kind of behind the scenes, it wasn't necessarily, I think it was kind of one of those groupthink things a little bit too, where one reporter sees one thing and kind of just believes, and then it's a whole domino effect of groupthink. Sometimes that happens that way, and I think it kind of did in this case.
Mob mentality, I think, is what you're referencing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and not only Flory, the only person maybe that can even challenge him potentially for Mr. Basketball this year, Jack Benter of Brownstown Central, who is heading towards the black and gold up in West Lafayette, Purdue, also on that list yesterday. Another highly sought after player.
Yeah, Jack Benner, he'll sign today. I think he's just doing a little ceremony, small thing, pretty quiet at his school. And yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, Purdue's got a 5-player class now. I think he's either 4th or 5th, I want to say, as far as the recruiting rankings go, which, as we know, Matt Painter does not care at all about recruiting rankings and all that sort of thing. But I think Jack Benner, you know, you watch Purdue play the other night, and it's almost like an Indiana All-Star team out there. It's like, oh, I covered that guy, covered that guy, covered that. You know, it's kind of fun, at least in my position. It's like I've watched all these guys play for so long, and Benner kind of fits right into that role as well. And he'll be a guy who can catch and shoot. He's a really good passer. You know, he's just very, you know, sees the floor really well. You know, knows he's not like ultra quick necessarily. Defensively will be probably the biggest question with him, or something he has to prove, you know, foot speed, guarding on the perimeter, that sort of thing. But man, offensively, he is very, very high level player, you know, who can fill it up. And then, like I said, he knows where the ball needs to go too. It's not like he's a shooter only, just standing out there. He can move the ball and pass it as well. So really like Jack's game. And I think he's obviously got, you know, some work to do as far as, you know, playing at the next level, but I think he can really fill a role for that Purdue team.
There are 2 players on this list that stand out to me because they're intriguing. The first of which is a kid named Nick Book, 6'8", from New Zealand, transferred in from Oak Hill Academy. First of all, who the hell transfers in from Oak Hill Academy? It's usually the other way around. But man, that size, I've not seen him play. What kind of, I don't know if you've even gotten to see him play yet, but boy, that just seems like somebody I would like to see play and see what he has.
I have seen him play. I probably saw 3 or 4 games this summer when he was playing with Westfield in the Charlie Hughes with his high school team. And yeah, to your point, I mean, maybe that's the new trend is guys come in from prep school to Indiana high school basketball. That'd be kind of unique, but he he's a New Zealand native. He's very hard nosed player, like very physical, I would say, but also he's not like a undersized banger either. He's a lefty who can shoot and has skill. I was really impressed with him. There's I think probably varying opinions, I think, from people I talked to about him, but not like bad opinions, but just like what he can be at the next level and that sort of thing. I mean, I think he picked up an Evansville offer recently, but I would imagine he's going to get a lot more because of his skill set. And just like I said, he's super physical and he plays really well off Trey Buchanan, their returning guard, who I really think highly of too. So yeah, he's this class is not, I would say it's, to be honest with you, it's probably one of the weaker classes I can remember overall, just like from going all the way
from
through
star power. And you mean that by having with truly star power at the top?
Yeah. And I was Cannon Catchings, who he would be in that he would be very high on that list, who Purdue today, who's now at overtime elite. I actually caught up with him this week too, or last week, and wrote a story about him that ran today also. But yeah, I mean, the star power is pretty good. I mean, but the overall class is just sort of like, I'm not sure what to make of it. There's some good players, but just, guys who haven't really proved themselves totally yet. There's some intriguing players, but I really like Book. Another guy named Dylan Morans, who's on that list, who I probably have higher than most people do, but I really like his game as well. And I think he's got a lot, he's got a lot more potential that he can get to. He's a D1 player for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting, not that I don't like the class. It's just that, I think
I get it.
There's some guys that still have to prove themselves. It's not super, super deep. I think the next year's class is actually deeper, but we'll see. I mean, all this stuff ends up playing out, and and when you lose talent too, like the 25 class lost Harrelson to prep school, although he's still in state, so I'll still count him on these lists. But Catchings leaves. I mean, your whole class looks different when those top level guys leave the state.
When did Book come? Did he play in Indiana last year?
No, he came. He was there in June. I don't know when exactly. He obviously before the Charlie Hughes in June. So he was with them. I think he was with them all through June, actually. So he must have came whenever his school year at Oak Hill got done.
The other name on here that stands out to me, and probably for different reasons, but he's a 6'3" guard who you say would be playing somewhere in college basketball next season if he was not such a big-time football prospect. Johnson, who is a 4-star football recruit and committed to Notre Dame, is a potential NFL safety on the future, as well as being dynamic on the court. But a lot of times we see those great athletes, but that's not something you see every day.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing him as a freshman in basketball, and I didn't know, I knew he was a football prospect. I didn't know he was that type of football prospect at that point. I guess no one really knows, but yeah, he's really, really good basketball player also. I think if he did it full time, he would be he would probably be a high major basketball player, at least a mid-major player for sure. I would think high major, but obviously he didn't end up going down that route, so you don't fully know. It's kind of like you see some of these guys like Gary Harris back in the day who he was really good at football but he didn't get a lot of offers because everyone knew he was going basketball. So I think he could have played at Notre Dame for football probably if he really wanted to, but some of these guys, they just don't get the offers, just like Taven Jackson with basketball too. I think he could have got offers in basketball but didn't for the same reason. So I don't know. Johnson really, he's a really good basketball player, but his future, I mean, he's sensational football player. Like I said, super athlete who played offense and defense in high school, and I think projects from what everyone says as a safety in football. But I think who knows? Once you get them on campus, you find out what they're able to do for you, and maybe you can use them both ways somewhat.
I was going to switch over to high school football because the playoff season is to the point where this is the regional round. So you had a lot of sectional champions. Any big surprises, big upsets last week?
Not, I would say, not to the extent of there was just a super big upsets or that. I mean, probably the biggest surprise or the best game, honestly, was Mooresville and Brebeuf Jesuit. It was 40-39, and Mooresville won on a last-second field goal, but had to go. Basically, they were down by 2 with 24 seconds left and at their own 20, and had to hit a 45-yard pass, then got down to kick the field goal, missed it, but Brebeuf called a timeout. So they got another chance to kick it and made it. So that was sort of the wildest game of the week. There's a lot
I don't know. What about the what was the down in Evansville, I believe. Was it Castle and North that was like 50-60 or somebody was this, they scored like 110, 111 points in this game. I can't remember what game it was. Maybe
that may have been the wildest overall. Maybe this was the wildest finish of all. But yeah, Mooresville now, they're playing New Pal. So, maybe living on a little bit of borrowed time with that game, because New Pal's really good. The game to watch out for is probably, next week in that class, if East Central and New Pal play each other in the semi-state, that could be, I'd be interested to see how New Pal stacks up in that game against East Central. Has just annihilated everybody basically up to this point. So, that could be the 4A game. That's really the state championship and all, for all circumstances. Who knows? But that kind of be how I would think it would happen. This week, I think probably the biggest game you look at is, Cathedral. I covered Cathedral last week. They beat Lawrence North 20-3. They onside kick on every kick. I thought it was just like off the opening kick, just to catch them by surprise. They did it every kick. So, I don't know.
How many were successful?
0. But basically they're doing that to keep Lawrence North speed. Their speedy receivers get to keep their hands off the ball. And they basically said, this game, we don't care about field position. We think if they're going to score, it's going to be big plays anyway. And it's sort of throwing everything about field position football to the wind. And it was kind of cool. I mean, it's sort of like, it's not like Bill Peebles just started coaching yesterday. He's what I would say is a traditional coach normally. So it's kind of cool. He's thinking outside the box on that. And it worked. They gave up 3 points despite all that bad field position the defense had. So I'm curious if they do that again against Ben Davis this week. I mean, Ben Davis is just as fast and more talented than Lawrence North. So I don't know if you can get away with that. But I would imagine they'll do something, pop-up kicks or something or whatever to try to keep the ball out of their hands as much as they can. So that intrigues me. I'll be covering that game. Ben Davis, I think, is as good as anybody in 6A. And then, the winner of that would most likely see Center Grove the next week. Center Grove plays Warren Central. Warren is a little bit down, but also sort of dangerous. Even though they're 5-6, they're still, they still have a really good defensive line, good players on that team. So that'll be interesting on the south half. And then the north half, HSE and Westfield play each other. That's a rematch of a game that was decided on the last play of the game in mid-September. Westfield won 30-28. Controversial finish in that game. So I think a lot of emotions going into this one, and two teams that know each other really well. So, that could also be for the state bid on the north half. I think whoever wins that game will be favored against Crown Point or Penn in the next game in the semi-state. So HSE, they came close last year. We'll see if they can get through. But yeah, I mean, your Evansville North was a team. They beat Castle 60-50 last week. So that was a wild 5A game, and they'll play Bloomington South this week, and Bloomington South's really good. So a lot of good games happening in the regional. Like I said, I think 11 of the 24 games this week are rematches of last year's regional. So a lot of familiarity between these teams.
Well, we'll certainly keep up with it. Make sure you give Kyle a follow at the Indy Star and keep local papers alive. Be a subscriber. I am. Kyle, thank you so much, brother. We appreciate you.
No problem. Thanks, Jim.
You betcha. Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star joining us. Up next, the Hall of Famer Rick Bozich joins us. We can talk about everything. Basketball, football, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, whoever you like, hate, don't even know about. Plenty more coming up right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Hello, Ricky.
Were you there last night?
Yes, sir. I got there late because we were doing our first post-game show, so I was over there and I had to race, and I left as soon as the game was over. I didn't stick around for the post-game presser, which for that time, but I'll get that changed for the next one. But interesting. Were you there?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah. They did some good things. They have some things, a lot of things to work on.
Yeah, and a lot of teams do right now. It's learning. It doesn't matter how good Mackenzie Mbako is, talent-wise. Things you have to know, do, learn, recognize, and that doesn't happen in 3 games. And that's the one thing people have to realize. Although when people like Gabe Cupps do what he does, it makes it just comes natural to him. He just, I hate to waste this, and I'll say it again, but he just seems so like, hey, this is what I do. It's just very relaxed. He's not pressured. He does not look pressured. And wow, what a relief that has to be. And that's why he was on the floor so much.
Yeah. He looked like a guy that, he wasn't like speeded up or looking over his shoulder or am I doing this right or am I doing that right? He just played. And the stat line doesn't blow you away, but it's obvious once they went to that 3-guard lineup, it changed the game.
How about this Nick Book kid? I'm intrigued about him. Nick Book. He transferred. This is the basketball high school kid that transferred into, where is he at? Westfield, I think, maybe. He's 6'8" from New Zealand, transferred in from Oak Hill Academy.
Really?
Yeah.
Is Indiana recruiting him?
This is the first I've heard of him. He's not played in Indiana yet. I was talking to Kyle about him because he's listed as one of the top recruits of this year or of the 24 class. And I'm like, okay, well, no one probably knows a lot about him. He's maybe a hidden gem. I don't know.
What's his connection to Indiana?
He plays at Westfield High School. I don't know why he got there. It's a great question. Don't know how, why, but I would imagine there's a connection somewhere between Oak Hill and there, I would guess. But that is a total guess.
All right, here we go, guys.
Chop Shop Market and Table has the largest selection of in-house made products around and everything you need to make a gourmet meal at home. Or pick out a tomahawk steak or a grouper filet and enjoy it cooked to perfection in Chop Shop Steakhouse. Chop Shop Market and Table, a part of the Wild Food Group, is your butcher, baker, and fish house, no matter where you live.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville and Evansville. Pizza, burgers, beer. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Wednesday. Thanks a lot for being with us. We greatly appreciate it. This segment brought to you by our good friends down in Clarksville. Bubba's 33 right off of I-65 on Veterans Parkway. Pizza, burgers, beer, great place to catch a game. And their food is fantastic, all made fresh and daily. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com joins us now. Rick has been a busy man covering Louisville, covering Indiana. But I did turn around at the first IU game and was shocked and look, and I'm like, oh, hell, that's Eric Crawford. Eric Crawford was there. I'm like, wow, they sent the A-team. Or Rick, or I should have said Rick Bozich's driver.
Yeah, that was last Friday night. Eric wanted to go up for the Marion game. He did a TV story on the first men's game after the passing of Bob Knight. So yeah, he wanted to go up that night. So he went up, and I was there last night, and I think I'm coming back Sunday for Army. So we'll have you covered at IU basketball.
A lot of people probably a little nervy last night. First game didn't go exactly like people thought it might, with a runaway win, because they're playing a team that you haven't heard of. But it doesn't matter. These guys are still Division I athletes. Number one, number two, they're playing their ass off because they're getting to play in Assembly Hall against Indiana, and they're getting to do it early. And sometimes things just go right. And my God, Florida Gulf Coast, I think they could have shot a 3-pointer from Fort Lauderdale and it would have gone in. They were at draining threes. At one point, they were at like 50%. And it was crazy, but yet they could not get ahead of Indiana until they did. And then Mike Whitson called that timeout. And then, man, you want to talk about a change for Indiana. That's when the game completely turned around.
Right. I mean, I'll give credit for Florida Gulf Coast. I think they have 8 players back from a decent team. We all know that Pat Chambers is a very solid coach. He did good things at Penn State. He was always hard for Indiana to beat when he was at Penn State. And they had a style of play, and they stuck with it. I mean, they had 24 field goals, and 13 of them were threes. They were going to try and beat Indiana by shooting perimeter shots. And you saw in, I think it was the Marion exhibition game, where Indiana gave a bunch of threes. So that's got to be high on the list of things that Mike Woodson needs to work on, is defensive rotations and not over helping, and figuring out the switching and all that stuff. But I think you benefit from playing games like that. You're better to play a game like that than you are to beat somebody by 30 points, because you learn, which guys are going to pull it together when the situation looks a little bleak. And it looked bleak when it was 48-42. And I think there was a little bit less than 11 minutes to go. And that's when Woodson went to the 3-guard set. And Indiana immediately proved, offensively and defensively, they scored the next 6 possessions and took the lead, a 14-0 run. And defensively, with 3 guys out who can defend on the perimeter, they made it harder for Florida Gulf Coast to get those open looks. So, and Ware played better than I thought he would. He had a double-double plus 3 blocks and 4 assists. He's a good passer. He's a good player. I mean, I think if Mike Woodson really can get him to all the way buy in, he's got a chance to be a really good player. He's different than Trace Jackson Davis. He's not going to be Trace Jackson Davis, but he can do some things Trace Jackson Davis couldn't do, and that's step away and shoot threes. And he's a longer guy, where Jackson was a really good shot blocker. Ware could be just as good, if not better.
Yeah, he's more athletic, has more length. And I've said this a lot today already, but I think he's sneaky. It's hard to be sneaky at 7'2", but he is, because the guys that are coming in that are being defended by somebody else, they're trying to get in and around that defender. And then all of a sudden, here comes me in the middle with a broomstick, swatting your shot away. And that's what it was like. But just having that presence is going to help Indiana defensively, because teams have to deal with that around him, even on the guys that aren't being guarded by him.
Yeah, what did he play? 36 minutes, 37 minutes? It was a lot. He and Galloway played almost all the game. He's going to have to get stronger. Cliff Marshall's going to be critical in this and get him stronger, because once he gets in the Big Ten, he's going to be going against strong physical guys. He's going to have to be able to hold his position on the block defensively and be able to power through and score offensively. That's, to me, one of the big growth areas for him. But I know that I talked to at least 2 of them, one scout from the Spurs and one scout from the Heat. There were at least, I think, 4 NBA scouts there last night, and they're there to look at Khalil Ware and Mackenzie Mbako. So he's on the radar, and he's got a chance to be a really good player. So that was encouraging. Renew played pretty well. One rebound is disappointing, but he made the big driving basket out of the timeout that got the momentum going the right direction. Galloway was solid, 7 for 9. You'll take that almost any time. Xavier played better in the second half. And as I wrote about, Gabe Cupps, I thought was a different maker for a guy who only had one basket, which was a huge 3, which gave him the 11-point lead, made both of his free throws, had a couple steals. When he was in the game, they just looked like a team like, okay, there's a leader. He's getting them going in the right direction. And the kid, I mean, he's fearless, and he looks like he's a 7th-year senior in terms of his poise when he's out there. I mean, like he's just a basketball player. He's not going to play in the NBA, but he's going to be a really productive college basketball player at Indiana for 4 seasons.
He reminds me in somewhat of Jordan Halls, but a little. I hate this to say this, but a little better. I'm not saying he's a better shooter right now. He just seems to have. He's got a better toolbox. He can do more
better
already.
Defender than Hulse, yeah.
And he's doing it already. Coming in as a freshman, which that's a great sign. Rick's piece right now out on WDOB.com.
He's a athlete. The thing about him is, if you watched him, he has that right arm out there like he's trying to guide the defender. And, it was annoying the Florida Gulf Coast players. I saw a couple times guys were like trying to slap his arm away. Yeah, and he wasn't going away. I mean, it's obvious to him that it's obvious to me that he's a kid who understands all parts of the basketball game are important. There's some guys that get a lot of their acclaim because they can score. But Gabe Cupps isn't going to be a 20-point per game guy. Even when he starts in a year or two, he might only be a 12 or 13-point per game guy. But he's going to be a complete basketball player in every way. He didn't make any dumb plays. That one steal he had down by the baseline against a bigger guy was that was impressive, I thought. I mean, Woodson, said it in the post-game press conference. There's a reason he's wearing the Indiana uniform because, I thought he's a winner. He's a basketball player.
I hate to say this, but Archie Miller began the recruitment of him, I believe, correct?
I think so, yeah, under Brian Walsh.
Yeah, I'm gonna give Brian Walsh the credit there, without question. No doubt.
He's from the Dayton area.
Yeah, a great one. He's just his comfortability is just amazing. It just looks like it doesn't matter what the score is. It doesn't matter how much time's on the clock. It doesn't matter who they're playing. He is just locked into his own box and is able to keep the outside noise out.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell last year that he's all in on Indiana too, because after he committed, he was at more games than he missed. He was playing his high school season, and he was always there sitting behind the bench. And I would think he would be a guy that other guys would want to play with because he's not hunting shots. He's going to get, if you do what you're supposed to do and you get open, he will get you the ball. And that's the kind of point guard I think a lot of guys would play with. Now, some games I'm sure he's a freshman. He'll have some bad games, and physically there'll be players who'll be able to take advantage of him. But overall, I mean, he's a really good addition to this team, and the way he played last night, he made a difference. He really did.
Well, and just like if someone handed me or you the keys to a Lamborghini, there's probably going to be a learning curve. Mm-hmm. That's what I think of when I think of Mackenzie Mbako. He has got that kind of talent, but at the same time, he has to learn, all right, how to drive this Lamborghini and to navigate the roadways and everything else, because right now he's got the speed and he knows how to hit the gas pedal, but he's got to be able to control that thing. And that's where he has some learning to do.
Yeah. I thought in the first half, he played pretty good defense. In the second half, I think he got lost on a couple of plays early on, and he only played 2 minutes in the second half. I mean, Woody pulled him and he didn't get back in the game. But the good sign was that he was on the bench and he wasn't pouting. He was engaged, cheering, standing up, and all those things. So that was a good sign. But you're right. He's got skills. He just has to learn how his skills will effectively translate into what Indiana's trying to do offensively. And it was just a one game sample, but the offense just seemed to be more cohesive when they had three guards instead of three big guys. That's Mbako, Renew, and Ware is a pretty big front court. I'm not sure how totally complementary playing all three of those guys is.
Yeah, and having the three guards out there that's not the unit I think that any coach, Mike Woodson, maybe even expected to not only have on the floor, but to be so successful.
You thought it would be Gunn?
Well, I mean, just as far as if they were going to go with the three guard lineup, yeah, just because it gives you some range and shooting, but his shooting is still, he's kind of forcing it a little bit still, it looks like. Yeah. And defense, he's got to get up to speed. Woody said that last night, that not only CJ, but Caleb Banks and McKenzie.
Yeah, I mean, Gunn just needs to have a good game at some point. I think he's really putting a lot of pressure on himself and pressing and to make threes because everybody believes he's a good shooter. He just hasn't shown it yet in a game, other than I think he made a couple threes in one of the exhibition games. And he'd be if he can figure it out and get going the right direction, it'd be a big positive because of his size. He gives you a 6'5", 6'6" guy who can, either guard a small forward or a two guard. So that they're going to need him at some point to contribute. But it didn't happen for him or for Banks or for Mbako last night. Even for Anthony Walker, he started out okay in the first half, but he took a couple really bad shots, I thought, that's not part of his toolbox. And Woodson said it after the game too, and I believe it is that was a game they could have used Peyton Sparks to give Malik Renew a little bit of break here and then, because he is a guy who can score on the block.
Yeah, and it would have been interesting to see him and what he can do. Indiana is going to have a few more games, Army, in addition to
Wright State.
Wright State, who they play. But they've got to get these things worked out quickly because the level and talent is going to rise immensely when they arrive in New York City in about a week and a half.
Yeah, I saw UConn blew out their first opponent, and they're good. Even though they lost, 3 starters, I think, from the national championship team, they've still got players.
Which says a lot.
Right. And that'll be a difficult atmosphere to play in because UConn fans are a lot closer to New York City, and they're used to traveling to the Garden for the Big East tournament. That'll be a pro-UConn crowd. So that'll be a tough game for Indiana for sure. But Army's not quite as good as Florida Gulf Coast. Sunday night, Woodson should be able to, give more guys some time and figure out a few more things. Wright State's probably I don't know if they're as good as Florida Gulf Coast, but Wright State will be a tougher game.
Louisville, a potential Indiana opponent in New York. If things do not go well for Indiana against UConn, I'm going to predict that Indiana will be playing Louisville. If it does go well against UConn, I'm going to predict they'll be playing against Texas.
Right.
But for argument's sake, let's say it's Louisville. Louisville still struggling a little bit, losing their I guess that was an exhibition against Kentucky Wesleyan.
Right.
Regardless of that, they're still fighting to get to where Kenny Payne needs and wants them to be, and I'm just surprised that they have struggled so much because and people complaining about Kenny Payne. You look back, everybody loves Kenny Payne. The job that he has done, the places where he has been, they credit him with being the backbone of a lot of things. So I'm not sure how much of this is Kenny Payne, and this is just modern day college basketball where a lot of these teams are not what they were, and rebuilding a team that has been a juggernaut, that is not as easy as it once was, even though you have the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, they lost to Kentucky Wesleyan in their opener. I think it was by 3. And then they came back and beat UMBC Monday night by 1, and they were down by as much as 13. And considering what happened last year when they went 4-28, it was getting pretty tense in the KFC Yum Center when they were down by 13. They're more talented than last year. I think they're better than last year, but they still have some of the same issues that they had last year, and that's defensive intensity. I think they gave up 92 points. And, they've just at times have stretches where they break down on defense, and UMBC, there was one stretch in the first half where they scored on 8 straight possessions and 5 of them were layups. I mean, guys just getting beat off the dribble, driving to the basket and laying it in. So they've got a tough game. They got Chattanooga on Friday night, and then they play Coppin State next week before they head up to New York to play Texas. So Indiana-Louisville game will be interesting because both teams, nobody wants to go to New York and come home with 2 L's after spending the weekend in New York City.
No, and it's much bigger for Indiana because that's a game they have to win. They cannot lose to this Louisville team now. This is not your grandpa's Louisville team right now.
It won't be good on your NCAA tournament resume. I'll put it that way.
No, it will not. What can Louisville do against this Indiana lineup that, from what you've seen so far? I have not seen Louisville play yet.
Well, their guards of the wings are the strength of their team. They got Sky Clark, the kid who started at Illinois last year, is now their point guard, and he's a very solid player. Their best overall player in the first game was Mike James, who's a wing. He'll be a tough matchup problem for Indiana. I would imagine that'd be a Trey Galloway assignment because Mike White is about a 6'4" guard who actually played power forward in high school. He will try and drive you and score. Didn't make a ton of threes in the first game. I think he had 1, but he's a double dude. He had I think 25 points and 10 rebounds in the opener. He's a third. He started all of last year. He probably knows Kenny Payne's system as well as anybody in the team. And he's a very competitive kid. So that's the main guy. I mean, where Louisville has been the weakest is inside. They got out rebounded by 13 or 14 by Kentucky Wesleyan. So they haven't been a strong team inside. So I would think it'd be a game for Malik Renew to play well.
Absolutely. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, unbelievably, we have Big Ten football news to talk about. Back with more Rick Bozich on Indiana Sports Beat Radio right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Man, I don't even want to say it, but what if Indiana did the unthinkable and won out?
Would that put another year on Tom's contract?
It would.
Yes, yep. And extends everything.
5 wouldn't, would it?
No, it's a bowl game.
It's a bowl game. What if they win 5 and go to a bowl game because there aren't enough 6-win teams?
Ooh, now you got to get tricky like that. Let me tell you, Indiana is not getting invited to a bowl game at 5-7 because
it's usually based on academic performance. So I mean, they very well could be. That's how they decide.
I mean, they played better the last 2 games. I have. When was the last time they won 4 straight?
4 in a row.
2020 year.
It had to be the COVID year.
Yeah.
And although these are all winnable games, 2 of them are on the road. They're better than Purdue, but that's still a Purdue game. But they're not better than Illinois.
This will be the hardest game. Illinois will be the hardest game.
Yes, and I think that if nothing, maybe they're equal with Illinois, but it's at Illinois.
They may have a different quarterback this week too.
Illinois?
They switched. I can't remember what the circumstance was, but in the Minnesota game, they put a guy named John Paddock in towards the end.
Because of injury or performance?
I think I wish I knew. I don't have it right in front of me, but I think there might have been.
I think Brett Bielema got a message from Deion Sanders saying he needed to make a change. But how stupid did Deion look after making, even though the score wasn't that bad, their offensive statistics were awful after he made the change of all those changes that he did.
It was an injury, by the way.
It was an injury.
Yep. And
I'll say this: I mean,
drive that had him win.
Louisville's Indiana's what 3-6.
Yep.
I mean, the combined record of 4 of the teams they've lost to have lost 2 games. Louisville lost 1, and Penn State lost 1. Ohio State and Michigan are defeated. Isn't their schedule like top 5 toughest in the country?
Oh, it is. Yeah, it usually is because they play in the Big Ten East. And the sad thing is, Louisville's not as good as their record is, I don't think. I think it's partially because I don't think they played that part of schedule. But go online to set your tee time or call 812-824-4040. The Golf Club at Eagle Point in Bloomington.
This segment is brought to you by Reynolds Family Dentistry in Sellersburg. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Wow Food Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this hump day, November 8th. Rick Bozich from WDRB.com. Make sure you're giving him a follow for all of your sports content. He covers it all for you. College football, I talked about the Jim Harbaugh mess earlier, which is just kind of funny. Not really, but something is coming for Harbaugh, but Michigan will fight it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out. That's going to be something that affects the college football playoffs like nothing we've ever seen.
Yeah, after I got home from Bloomington last night, I went back and read the transcript of the teleconference with the college football playoff people, and 2 or 3 people tried to ask questions about Michigan, and every time the answer was, that's not a college football playoff issue. That's a Big Ten or NCAA issue, and all we're doing is ranking the team. So they want no part of it. They don't want to be involved in any way. I'm sure they don't want to open themselves up to litigation. If Michigan is still out there and nobody else has punished them, the college football playoffs are going to include them and seed them as high as they possibly can, and that's just the way it's going to be.
I share your sentiments, Tanis. I put out a tweet that was a little over the top over the weekend when Washington went to USC into the Coliseum and wins a shootout against one of the top offenses in the country, against the reigning Heisman Trophy winner. And they did what they needed to do. And then all I hear is, well, they don't have any defense. Well, you might understand that they're playing against a top offense almost every freaking week. That's part of it. But I think Washington is getting screwed because it says Washington here and not Ohio State, not Michigan, not an SEC team, because they have beaten the number 6 team in the country. They have beaten maybe 2 other ranked teams. I know USC was ranked. They have Utah coming up this week. They also have Oregon State coming up. And they finished with the Apple Cup with Washington State, which was ranked. And then you've got the Pac-12 championship game. They've got to go 13-0 to make it. There are other teams that do not have to go undefeated to make it, and that is going to be just mind-boggling to me because Alabama, if they beat Georgia, even though they have lost, they will get in. Does Georgia still get in? I don't know. The Big Ten is going to take care of itself. Michigan, Ohio State, loser, they're out, I think. But that's not given. But with what is behind them, Louisville, I don't think that even if they beat Florida State, can make it, depending upon what's going on. There's just so many damn scenarios. I guess you can't say won't, but
Right.
it would be hard for Louisville to make it, even if they beat Florida State, because I don't think that they're going to give credence to them and their schedule like Michigan gets. Like, well, Michigan's schedule sucks. That's another thing about. I'm like, who the hell have they beaten? They haven't even played anybody yet, and we're in week 10. But Georgia, they're going to get, they got beat by Alabama. So they only dropped to 4th. There's just so much that it goes on. It's going to be, I really wish we had the 12-team playoff.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I'll start with what you said about Washington. They are getting, they're of the 5 unbeatens. They're the ones that get the least respect. I think some people look at the Oregon game and don't give them as much credit for that because it was at home and Dan Lanning called a stupid game. And
yes, they might have still lost
points that they might have won the game. Beating USC at USC, I think they should have got more credit for that. But because they gave up 42 points, people jump on them. But USC scoring a lot of points on everybody except for Notre Dame. But if you beat Utah and you beat Oregon State and Washington State and then beat Oregon again, I mean, they'll be in for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
As for Louisville, Louisville has to pass 7 teams to get in. That's a lot. But I'll say this about Louisville: if they beat the rest of the schedule, and they've got Virginia at home tomorrow night, then they got to win at Miami. And I know Miami's not great, but it is still a road game. Got Kentucky at home. SEC team.
That's going to be a challenging game.
And then you'd have to give Florida State their first loss on a neutral site. They would end up, and if they played 3 Power 5 teams in their non-conference schedule: Indiana, Kentucky, and Notre Dame. They do have a win against Notre Dame, and it was an impressive win. And the game they lost, they were without their best running back for the last 3 quarters of the game, and it was in the rain. But you can explain it in a lot of different ways, but I don't think they'll get in the playoff, but I don't think they should be excluded because they play. Have you watched them the last 2 weeks? I mean, Duke's not a bad team. Duke beat Clemson.
No.
Duke, they dominated Duke. They just shut them out. They beat them 23-0. Virginia Tech is not a great team either. Purdue beat them. I know that, but they've been playing better. They dominated Virginia Tech. Louisville's playing good football right now, and they'll have the stage to themselves tomorrow night against Virginia. They're favored by 20, and people will get a look at what Louisville can do.
Yeah, and it's just there's I don't even know 5. Well, there's 5 undefeated teams left,
right?
And then you've got almost as many 1-loss teams, which is
Alabama, Texas, and Oregon, all clamoring for attention. To me, the team that's the most vulnerable is Michigan. If they get beat, I think they're out. Ohio State, I think, still would have a bit of a chance if they lose because they have the wins against Notre Dame and Penn State. But we'll see.
And that's another thing. People keep talking about how impressive Ohio State's resume is. I'm like, wait a minute. I go, Notre Dame is not. They're an okay team, but
what's Notre Dame lost now? 3 or 2 or 3? 3?
At least I think 3. And so then
Clemson was the third one.
And who else did you say they beat?
They lost to Louisville and they lost one.
No, I meant who else did
Ohio State? They beat Penn State.
Penn State. Penn State barely hung on to beat Indiana. And I'm wondering how good Penn State really is, to be honest with you.
Well, we'll find out this week. They got Michigan at home. They got to win that game. But yeah, I mean, let's be honest. Ohio State, did they look like a playoff team when they beat Indiana? I don't think they did.
No, not even close.
Right.
And I've never seen a team go from that far from or a quarterback that had to grow up that much. I think he's gotten to be where he manages the game okay. He's not a Heisman Trophy candidate type quarterback, at least not now.
Yeah, not at all.
And everybody is blowing up Marvin Harrison Jr. Yes, I think he is one of, if not one of the best receivers in the game. I don't know that he's better than Rome Odunze at Washington.
Right.
and Rome Odunze is on the number one offense in the country.
Right.
He plays with a quarterback that's thrown for the most yards in the country. So again, Ohio State, I was like, wow, I was shocked. First of all, I was shocked they put him in front of Georgia because Georgia hasn't been beat since Moby Dick was a minnow. They've won.
Georgia should be number one. To me, the team that's obviously the most questionable team is Florida State. I mean, they get credit for beating LSU on, quote, a neutral site. Well, the game was in Orlando. It really wasn't that neutral.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how good LSU is. They're good, but they're not elite. And then the other team they beat that's ranked is Duke. And that's a nice win, but I'm not convinced Florida State is at the level of those other teams. And, they got Miami this weekend, they got North Alabama, and then they got at Florida. Florida's not very good. So, then they got the ACC championship game. So Florida State's probably the most likely team right now. If you're going to say pick one team that you're sure is going to be in the playoffs, I'd say it'd be Florida State.
I would agree just because of their schedule. Yeah. And I think that's sad because I don't think they're as good as Washington. I don't think they're as good as Oregon.
Oregon's good. Oregon's very good.
Boy, Oregon they could be better than Washington. And I love Washington. I hope Michael Penix wins the Heisman. But it's like the media continues to keep trying to push, Marvin Harrison out. I'm like, what the hell? How can you compare Marvin Harrison to what Michael Penix is doing? Get the hell out of here.
The hot name now I saw for the Heisman is Jaden Daniels, the quarterback at LSU. He seemed to become the flavor of the month in the national media last week.
Until you lose. And that does not do you very, very good. Indiana traveling to Illinois this Saturday, a must-win game. It's basically tournament. They're in tournament play. You lose, you're out. I've gone this entire season saying it doesn't matter what happens, that Tom Allen's going to be coming back. Well, I have changed my tune on that. I think that his job is now on the line.
Well, you really do?
Year. I really do. I think that his job is now on the line this year. If Indiana does not go to a bowl game, I think that there will be a change. Not that
you think they're going to come up with the $20 million?
Well, yeah. First of all, it's basically a $12 million buyout because you're going to have to pay the $8 million, and so if they swallow the $8 million themselves, which let's see, can they find 8 out of that 50-something million that they'll get from the Big Ten, and then can they get three people that have money that $4 million is lunch money to them? Yeah, I think they can, especially if they sell them on the new Big Ten. Hey, we've got to be a part of this. We can no longer be a bystander. You've got Washington, Oregon, USC, all these teams coming in. Indiana has to be a player in this sport because it is the engine that drives the train.
Interesting take. I mean, they were lucky to beat Illinois last year at home. Illinois they got 4 wins, so they're still trying to get bowl eligible themselves. It's a game Indiana could win. I mean, I know they're not favored, but I'll give them credit. They've played a lot better the last 2 weeks against Penn State and Wisconsin. The line's better. The quarterback plays better. The overall cohesiveness of the team looks to be better. And if you beat Illinois, then it really does get interesting because you're going to come home and play Michigan State. And at home, you definitely have a chance to win. And then you end up having to go to Purdue for bowl eligibility, which is the way it's always supposed to be. So, yeah, I'd like to see them win this weekend just to make it interesting.
Yeah, and they're better. They're better than Purdue. I'll say that right now, where they're playing better. What's up next for you, brother?
Tomorrow night, Virginia at Louisville football. Friday night, Louisville basketball against Chattanooga, and Sunday night, Army at Indiana basketball. So a big week.
Busy schedule. Rick Bozich, WDRB.com. Make sure you give him a follow. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you so much.
See you Sunday.
Absolutely. The great Rick Bozich joining us here, and big thanks to him. Thanks to Kyle Neddenriep from the Indy Star, Dylan Sinn from the Fort Wayne Journal and Gazette. Most importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you, we have no reason to be here. John, the producer, for keeping us between the white lines. Tomorrow we'll have more to talk about, a little more time to talk. John Boy, who's on the program tomorrow?
A lot of fun guys. I don't have it off the top of my head, so we'll just see tomorrow.
I usually have it written down already, but I don't. So it's always great. We'll be back tomorrow to do it again. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.